I've always been a very hands-on person, and I like the beauty of a machine that is well put together. I'm excited to work here because we are building a state-of-the-art particle accelerator in order to make medical radioisotopes more available for cancer treatments. I want to build something that matters, and this is something that matters. Being a member of IEEE, there's a whole community of people who are interested in what you're interested in. IEEE USA is my competitive edge.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the November edition of the IEEE-USA Washington Update. As always, I'm your host, Eric Heilman, Director of Government Relations for IEEE-USA here in Washington, D.C. And welcome to post-election lame duck transition madness. You obviously know what happened last week. This town is going nuts right now, as normally happens after an election. This was a particularly eventful election, and there's a lot of transition underway. There's a lot of stuff we can talk about, a lot of things I'm sure you are already seeing hour by hour in the news, because that's kind of how fast things are happening here in town. It's fun, it's crazy, it's exciting, it's a little like a roller coaster, but I want to take a few minutes and just talk through some of the things that are specific to us, some of the things that we are watching, maybe prognosticate a little bit on what we think is going to happen in the next couple of years, with a huge emphasis on the word think, because we know even less with this crew of incoming leaders than we would with others. So let's just dive in. We are now in a Republican town. It's President Trump's town. Republicans took control of both chambers and the White House, and this is a very, very red city. We have a one-party government for at least the next 2 years, and this is not totally unusual. We have had this periodically in the last several election cycles, the last several years, at least going back to President Clinton. Each president has had control of one-party control of Washington for 2 years of the first 4 years. It's usually the first term of their presidency, and then usually the American public kind of gets tired of one-party rule, and in the mid-year election cycle, they usually do a little bit of a correction. So I certainly expect that to happen next time around. I think Republicans will overplay their hand because they can, and because that's just historically what happens when one party controls all three pieces of the elected government. So strap in, get ready, because this one in particular is going to be a fun ride. And just to kind of remind you where we are in Congress, and I know everyone's seen these numbers, but this is sort of where we are as of today. The Senate is now controlled by the Republicans with 3 extra seats, which is somewhat significant in that the last several Senates have been extremely narrow margins for whichever party has been in the majority. So a 3-seat majority gives Republicans a little bit of wiggle room to do a lot of things. A lot less wiggle room in the House. There are still a few elections that have not been called yet, but it has been made official, I think as of last night or today, this morning, that the Republicans have officially retained control of the House of Representatives. And everything is happening right now to get ready for next year. All of the various parties within each chamber have been meeting to decide who's going to be their next leader, who's going to be the next chairman of this committee, who's going to be other party leadership spots. And obviously, you're seeing a flurry of activity from the incoming president about nominations to his cabinet, some of whom will be coming from the halls of Congress. And so there's a lot of churn and movement, a lot of activity and action going on right now. We have no idea how things are going to play out from a policy context, from a policy perspective. And to be fair, the first term of President Trump's presidency was very difficult to predict, very chaotic, very unorthodox. In some respects, we can expect a lot of the same this time around, although there's a lot of reasons why I think this is going to be different. And one of the things one of the reasons I think this is going to be different, and really I'm going to go backwards here, which I normally don't do, but when you look at the leadership in the House and the Senate now, if you recall the last time that President Trump was in office, for 2 years he had Mitch McConnell as the Senate Republican leader and Paul Ryan as the House Republican leader. And there was often some tension among the three of them, and certainly between the president and the leaders in Congress. They didn't always see eye to eye. There was some friction. I don't expect that friction to be as strong this time around. Certainly not in the House, and we'll talk a minute about the Senate. So I think it's going to be a little bit different in terms of the chaos and the unorthodoxy. And so let's just kind of talk through a few of the policy areas that we work on, that our membership cares about, that impact the membership, and just sort of do a little bit of a crystal ball reading on where we think things might go, with a massive caveat that all of this could be completely wrong and completely different once we get into the Trump administration next year and things start unfolding. AI is going to take a very different turn. President Biden was very earnest in putting out an executive order and engaging the federal government in making sure that as AI technology was rolling out and advancing, that you had safety, risk, certain types of regulations in place. I think that's going to be out the window. There's going to be an effort to just let the private the industry and private industry just move forward and innovate with a big eye on competing with China, and that's going to be a huge paradigm for this administration, this party in Washington for some time. A lot of the so-called big tech issues, I think, will continue, especially the antitrust actions that have been brought against some of those companies. Republicans generally, this Republican Party generally is skeptical of big companies and big tech. So I think you're going to see a lot of focus on that in an increased way. CHIPS and Science Act, this is a big program. We work on this. We support this. We have programming around the country in terms of events and things like that around this. We are supporters of this. No idea where the CHIPS and Science Act and the CHIPS program within the Commerce Department and the money that's been spent and authorized but not spent. No idea really where that's going to go. Frankly, I think it could go a couple of different ways. Because there's going to be such an increased focus on competition with China and America first in all things, but certainly in technology. I could see the CHIPS office and some of the CHIPS programs sort of falling under that umbrella in a helpful way. That certainly is one of the reasons that the original law was signed by President Biden to begin with, was to really elevate the U.S. role in the semiconductor industry and sort of onshore a lot of the supply chain. So it could fit really well within the rubric of how President Trump and Republicans want to legislate and make policy. On the other hand, this was President Biden's signature legislation, one of his signature economic and innovation bills, and he ran on it, or his vice president ran on it. And it's actually doing quite a bit of good in certain states in terms of doling out money to help semiconductor industries invest and put capital in the ground. So who knows where this could go? There has been criticism of the legislation of the program by key Republicans. President Trump has not always said the greatest things about it, but it's there. There's a lot there that could be built on. I think it could take a different tack, but it's definitely something we're going to be watching and doing what we can to kind of maintain as best we can. Energy, it's complicated because I think this president will be all over the map on that. Certainly he will favor fossil fuels the way I think a lot of Republican presidents will, but he's not also agnostic or averse to clean energy technologies either. He is reluctant and generally opposes federal subsidies for a lot of clean energy technologies. I think you're going to see some executive action to roll some of that back. But I think you're going to see more support for nuclear energy, EVs is going to be interesting to watch, obviously, with his new pal Elon Musk there now right by his side. So energy policy is going to be kind of an interesting one that could be a really mixed bag that we're going to be working and watching as well. A few other ones here. Basic research, obviously something that is near and dear to our hearts and to our memberships, identities and hearts as well. I do think AI could sort of remain a focal point, and you could kind of see funding and the federal level continue for that. But I don't know about other research areas. I just don't know. It's too early to tell. I think if we see a final budget for this fiscal year passed before the end of the year, the numbers there will give us a little bit of an indicator of where we might be headed next year. But I just don't know. There's obviously been a lot of talk about the federal workforce and the status of federal employees as difficult to remove from their jobs, a lot of protections that they have, and complaints by the Trump folks about not being able to put their people in place in certain roles. I don't know where this is going to go. We're going to watch it and track it closely. We obviously work very, very closely with many of the federal agencies and the amazing employees and workers and scientists and researchers that are there. And this is important to our membership. So we're going to keep tabs on this and weigh in where and when we can. Immigration, a touchy one, obviously. Very, very high profile issue for this election. The sort of silver lining that I do see in what I also expect to be a large push for an immigration bill that will have as its focus border security. I think there is room to get some movement on some of the high-skilled employee STEM-related workforce issues that we have supported for some time now. The challenge has always been getting something like that moving, absent a larger piece of legislation, but that would have to be more. That would involve a lot more of the immigration programs and really controversial areas that are out there, and most people just haven't wanted to go there. But I think they're going to go there this time. There's going to be a move to revitalize large immigration legislation, and we're going to do what we can to try and find a place at this table for some of the issues that we really care about. Space policy, I put Ask Elon up here because who knows. And I do think having Elon Musk sort of in his ear the way that he has been recently, and then could be in this next administration, we're going to see a lot more emphasis on the private space industry, which will put a lot of strain on the FAA in particular because of the regulations around receiving launch licenses. And so it's going to be an interesting ride. These are just some policy areas. And again, I don't know how much of this is going to be true or if we're going in different directions. In terms of Congress, there's going to be some changes in terms of the leadership of committees. Ted Cruz won his reelection and will be taking over as the Commerce Committee chairman. In the Senate, this is the committee that has jurisdiction over most of the policy issues and federal agencies that we care about and work with. He is going to be interesting to work with. He represents a state that's got a very large tech industry and a growing tech industry. A lot of companies are relocating to Texas. He's been skeptical of the CHIPS and Science Act programming and spending in the past. He tends to think that a better way to kind of address the issues in growing the semiconductor industry domestically is through the tax code, as opposed to some of the federal programs that the CHIPS and Science Act created. He does focus a lot on censorship by the tech industry, and I think there's going to be a lot of attention paid to that issue by him. If the Senate Appropriations Committee, this is the powerful committee in the Senate that formally puts together what becomes the final budget for the United States. With Republicans taking the Senate, Susan Collins of Maine is now going to be the chair. And I think she's going to be really good. She's a pragmatic senator. She's very supportive of CHIPS and Science Act and its programs. And she's a longtime legislator who's done a lot of navigating sort of from the centrist Republican lane. So I think it's going to be kind of interesting watching her work that committee in the next several budget cycles. Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee, I put this one up there because we've worked very closely with that committee in the last couple of years on AI related legislation when Senator Gary Peters, who's the current chair, with him and his staff. It's now going to be taken over by Rand Paul of Kentucky, who tends to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of government spending. He kind of goes through line items and will pull out some programs and some projects that the federal government is spending on, and he'll put shine a spotlight on it as wasteful. And it's just a different approach to a lot of the policy making and legislating that the previous chairman had. So we look forward to working with him and his staff as well, and certainly we think there's opportunities to get some stuff done there. In the House, and I think I've previewed this before because this has kind of been in the making. Congressman Bruce Babin of Texas is expected to become the chair of the House Science Committee. He represents the Johnson Space Center, so there's going to be a lot of focus and emphasis there. And we don't yet know who's going to be the Energy and Commerce Committee chair. This is a pretty powerful committee that actually has a lot of the jurisdiction over some of these areas in the same way that the Senate Commerce Committee does. I should say, by the way, that none of this is final. The members of each of these chambers still need to get together and decide and sort of formalize a lot of this. So it is subject to change, but right now this is what we all kind of expect to see with some of these committees and some of these policies. And speaking of leadership and deciding who's going to be in charge, I believe it was just yesterday that the Senate Republicans held their secret ballot election to choose their next leader to replace Mitch McConnell, who had been the longest serving leader of any party in the Senate in history. So this is going to be a big shift from sort of the way that Republicans have been led in the Senate for some time. And it's going to be Senator John Thune of South Dakota. Rick Scott and John Cornyn were in the mix for a long time, but it will now be John Thune. And when I was alluding earlier to President Trump's first term, where he had Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan, and there was some tension there. Like I said before, I don't envisage that much tension this time around, certainly not in the House. Speaker Mike Johnson just got reelected to retain his speakership. He's a big supporter, big fan of President Trump and his agenda. I don't quite want to say that it's going to be, the House is going to be a rubber stamp for President Trump. I don't think it's going to be quite that easy. At the end of the day, Speaker Johnson will still have an extremely thin majority in the House. And you just don't have a lot of leeway when you have that few, that slim a majority. That margin is really, really tight. And he'd have to have his entire conference, all the Republicans in the House together to support something. And that often happens, but sometimes on big things where sometimes they get a little regional and somebody from New York might not agree with somebody from California, even if they're the same party. Holding the whole conference together can sometimes be difficult. So even though Mike Johnson will work very, very closely with President Trump and the Trump White House, it's still going to be a little bit of a challenge to get through things in the House. The Senate's got its own challenges. If you watch, Washington, or you kind of know how things work. Yes, the Republicans now have a 3-seat majority in the Senate, but a lot of things still don't happen unless you reach a 60-vote threshold because of the rules around the filibuster. It's the Senate. It works in weird ways. Getting 60 votes for something is a lot harder than getting 51 to pass sort of things through regular order. So I don't necessarily think that there's going to be a complete push and just easy flow of legislative movement when President Trump needs something or Congress needs to act. I think there will be a lot that will pass and a lot that will move, and you'll see a lot of the Trump and Republican agenda move forward. But it's not always going to be as easy as folks think. Keep in mind as well, and I know this is talked about a lot, the Senate has to confirm all of the president's cabinet nominations. Names are popping up already right now for some, and some senators have commented here and there on some some names. We don't yet know who the Commerce Secretary nomination is going to be. We work very closely with a lot of the agencies that fall under that cabinet department, so we're going to watch that one very closely. I don't think we know energy yet or transportation. So some of these still need to be filled in, and then they have to go through the Senate, which goes through a process that's similar to legislation. Each of the nominees, the nomination is taken up by a committee, the committee that has jurisdiction over that particular department, and they have a hearing and they have a vote. And I would not be surprised if one or two of these nominations falls apart, gets pulled, doesn't quite get through. Like I said before, Trump can be pretty chaotic and unorthodox, and the Senate can also be chaotic and unorthodox at times. So this is going to be an interesting first few months of 2025 when we roll over to this new one-party government. Oh, and by the way, there's still 6 weeks left in this year. There's still 6 weeks left in President Biden's term. There's still 6 weeks left in a Republican House and a Democratic Senate. And they still have things to get done. So this is why post-election lame duck sessions are so interesting, because everybody is focused on the next year and bringing in a new president and a new Congress, new leadership in both chambers, new policy agendas, fresh, new, all this kind of stuff. But there's still things to get done right now. And the challenge, obviously, is that the people who need to do it, some of whom lost their elections, some of whom are no longer going to be in the majority next year. You have a president who needs to sign bills, and he's going to be handing over the keys to the White House to the other party at the end of this year. And so trying to get things done in that mix is a big challenge. Nevertheless, there are conversations underway. They know they need to try and figure out what to do with the 2025, the FY 2025 budget. They've been operating under a continuing resolution since the fiscal year began on October 1. That continuing resolution, which kind of keeps funding going at previous levels, that expires on December 20th. They passed a bill before the election to continue that, and they set that date at December 20th. So the clock is ticking now to December 20th, and Republicans, because they're going to be running everything next year, are kind of trying to figure out what they want to do, and they're trying to work with President Trump to get a signal from him whether he wants another CR to kind of keep things going for this, to continue government funding at current levels, or whether we want to pass the new budget that's out there, that's been proposed, and just put it behind us and move on. There are strategic and political and policy reasons for and against each of these options. And so they're trying to figure that out right now. And as of now, they've got December 20th to do that. As we often talk about, they will clear the NDAA. They will pass the National Defense Authorization Act. I think it goes back to the 1960s. They haven't failed to pass this since the 1960s. They will get this done, and I do think there will be some funding in there for some of the emergency relief as a result of the last couple of devastating hurricanes. So, are they going to be done by the 20th? Are they going to do another CR until the 23rd to give them more time? Are they going to punt till next year? Keep in mind, the Democrats still run the Senate right now. So who knows? But that's kind of where we are right now. Everyone's looking forward 2025. We still got to deal with 2024 in a big way. The federal agencies are acting too. And I know this is a very busy page, and I apologize if you can't read a lot of this. I think the point is just to show the level of activity as we're coming down to the end of the Biden-Harris administration. The federal agencies that are still in the Biden administration are pumping out funding notifications, announcing new programs. They're trying to lock in and get out as much of the stuff that supports his policies, supports the Biden-Harris administration for the last 4 years. And there's just been a flurry of activity. The one on the right is sort of the most fun. The Chips and Science Act, the Chips Office in the Commerce Department and NIST has been putting out notices almost daily. My email box just constantly fills up with their notifications about new funding that they've approved or signed an MOU for, a new partnership that they're announcing. Keep in mind, once President Trump comes in, this CHIPS program now becomes his to run and manage. And so the current Biden team is pumping out as much as they can to kind of solidify that legacy and, maybe make it a little bit harder for Trump to roll things back if that's the direction that he wanted to go in. So there's a lot coming out of the federal agencies to kind of preserve the Biden legacy and to make sure that, the stuff that they believe in, that they passed, that they've been working on for 4 years, doesn't just go away when a new president comes in. And by the way, this is pretty typical. This does happen, especially when there's a takeover on the White House by someone from a different party. So we certainly expected this, and it's been quite a flurry. I wanted to share this with everybody. I came across this morning. I haven't had a chance to really dive into this, but I saw this morning and thought it was extremely interesting because it really speaks to what we do here in government relations at IEEE-USA in working on policies that are very science-based, having members who are scientists and researchers, having all of those members help make the policy, set the policy priorities that we carry to Capitol Hill and to the agencies. The Pew Research Center just put out a report on the public trust in scientists and policymaking. I put the QR code and the link for this report here. I do think it's of interest, and I'm going to take some more time over the next day or two to dive into it. But not surprisingly, a couple of the findings in terms of support for scientists and the role of scientists in policymaking is quite split between the two parties. The thing that I found sort of most interesting was this last bit from the third bullet there, where a third of Republicans or Republican-leaning voters or individuals express a lot of distrust, and they don't have much confidence in science. And if a third of the Republican-leaning public feels that way, you can be sure that the people in the House of Representatives and the Senate who answer to them or who sort of are of a like mind to them, they're going to share those views as well, and that's going to impact policy, and that could make things much more challenging in some of the priorities and some of the legislation that we're working on and are going to try and pass. So interesting. Not sure, where this is going to go or how this is all going to play out. But I just thought this was interesting enough that I wanted to share with folks, and I do encourage you to go take a look at it. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about some of the programming that's going on. We've advertised this one. This is going to be the last time you're going to see it advertised because it's coming up very, very quickly. Our next iWork conference is in Huntsville. It's specific to the aerospace and defense sector. We've got an amazing program lined up right now. We've got sponsorship from NASA, from Redstone Arsenal, from a number of other federal agencies and local industry and business groups. Great lineup of speakers and lots more to come as we get close to this. If you're at all in the Southeast in the area, please come, please join us. This is going to be a really, really great event. We're actually doing it at the Space Center there in Huntsville. So it's going to be fun. And I wanted to remind folks, or maybe just announce to folks who weren't aware, we have been sponsoring a fellowship program for a number of years now and have a great group of alumni who have come through and been fellows here in Washington, D.C. over the years, who have gone on to do amazing things. We are still accepting applications for our fellowship program. They end at the beginning of next month. It's an amazing opportunity for PhD and established employees. You got to be sort of deeper in your career than just a recent graduate. You come to Washington, D.C., and you can work in Congress. You can actually be a staffer for a member of Congress or a committee. You can also work at the State Department or at USAID, and it's a phenomenal opportunity. So if you don't know about this, or if you were thinking about this, or someone you know might be interested, please let them know that the deadline for application is coming soon. And similarly, our internship program for students, for undergraduate students and graduate students, it's back. We had sort of shut it down for 2024. We rejiggered some things, got some programming stuff shored up, and we are now back accepting applications for the summer internship program for 2025. The deadline for that is the 1st of February. So if you have If your children or your friends or others are students, you think they might be sort of interested in a summer in Washington, D.C. to kind of do some engineering, some tech, some science, some policy, and kind of have fun, we encourage folks to go take a look at this. This is a great program as well. That's all I have. Lots going on, but also not really a lot to know or say for certain. We will be back next month. I'm not sure how different things will be. I think we'll have a little bit more things put in place in terms of what a Trump administration might look like. We may have a budget passed. We may have a better sense of what's going to happen with a budget. But it's going to be an interesting next few weeks. So let me kind of grow and see if I'm seeing any questions. I know sometimes it can be hard to find where to add those questions in the chat. It all depends on the platform you're watching this on. But you can always email me. I do often receive emails from some of you after the broadcast, and I always am happy to respond. So that's all I got. Have a great holidays, Thanksgiving holiday. I'll see you before the Christmas break, and it may or may not be an interesting one. Who knows? Take care, everyone.
There's cybersecurity issues, there's aging infrastructure issues, there's climate change issues that need to be solved, and I'm really excited that in my career I get to work on those types of problems. As a young professional, IEEE has given me access to opportunities to go to conferences, meet really cool people in the field, and so I think what IEEE provides is access to the larger community, and I don't know where else you would get that. IEEE USA is my competitive edge.